Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Mariam Zia. In today's program, we will be talking about an important and pressing issue that is escalation of India's false flag operations against Pakistan. Of course, when we look at the history, this has been a practice of Narendra Modi especially and Indian government in general as well, that in the lead up to general elections in India, there is always an escalation in the false flag operations and anti-Pakistan propaganda in India. In today's program, we will be talking about, of course, the repercussions on regional security of India's false flag operations. And of course, we will be talking about India's embarrassment at the global level as well, when we talk about US as well as Canada, in Qatar as well, in which Indian government was, of course, involved in different terrorist-related activities. And of course, when we talk about false flag operations, it has been a part of statecraft. But in this developing world and developed world, especially in the democratic world, should not be, of course, resorting to such manipulative tactics. We will be, of course, addressing all these issues. We will also be talking about the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom rationale behind, of course, imploring the US Department of State to, of course, regard India as country of concern. What are the reasons and what could be its implications on the region and beyond? We will be talking about all these issues, and later in the program, of course, we will be touching upon the recent escalation of Israeli aggression in Gaza and the ongoing genocide in Gaza and world's response to it. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Brigadier Retired Hamid Malik, who is Senior Analyst. Welcome to the program. And we are joined online by Mr. Naela Chohan, who is Senior Analyst. Welcome to the program. Of course, let's start with the basic, this false flag operations by the Indian government. And how do you see the history of these, false flag operations and Pakistan's response to these events, especially in the recent past?
Here we would like to highlight that in the community of nations, every country needs to have a very responsible stance and posture that emanates regional stability and security, as well as it adds to the global security also. But in this context, what we see the attitude of the Indian government, President Modi, and also in the past, they have never accepted Pakistan as an independent country, and they always wanted to have a hegemony over the regional countries, including Pakistan. And Pakistan has always defied that. Here I would like to also highlight that the Indian history of the Indian false flag operation goes back to 1971. With the hijacking of the Ganga aeroplane and blaming Pakistan, which was all false. And it was also proved, and Indian parliament attack, and then burning of the Samjhauta Express coming down to the Pulwama. And here in Pulwama incident also, that then the BJP governor, that is Satyapal, he has himself admitted that the Indian government, Modi government, failed to provide any substantial evidence which can implicate Pakistan involvement. So it is a, I think, litmus test to know about the acquisition, a false acquisition of the Indians for the involvement of Pakistan in any of the terrorist attack. On the other hand, what we see that India is unleashing unprecedented state terrorism on the poor Kashmiris, and it is also these flag operations. I think it is not only to blame Pakistan and also to divert attention of the international community from the barbaric acts Indian law enforcement agencies are committing in Kashmir.
Right, and of course it has a historical context, and in the recent past we are witnessing an escalation in these false flag operations. In your opinion, what is the rationale behind all this war-mongering hysteria of the Narendra Modi-led Indian government? Is it to gain electoral gain in upcoming elections in India, or of course to divert attention from the atrocities that they are committed in Kashmir?
Here we need to understand, one is the domestic audience and other is the international audience. As far as the domestic audience is concerned, the Modi government has got defeat, BJP government got defeated in 7 of the states.
Yes.
And now there are 9 more states elections are coming in 2024. And in previously what we have seen that the Modi government exploited the anti-Pakistan sentiment and also the Hindutva mindset.
Yes.
The extremist Hindus vote bank, I think Modi is again eyeing on that. And for the domestic audience, I think Modi is using as a slogan to get more votes for its election campaign.
And in 2019, we also witnessed that, of course, revocation of 370 and 35A were used as a tool. And of course, when Modi came into the government, he revoked those articles, changing the special status of Kashmir. How do you see that? Do you think that public sentiment, of course, responds positively to all these warmongering hysteria of India? And isn't it, leading to a social divide within India when we talk about, of course, Hindutva mindset?
If we analyze the Indian society presently, the Hindutva mindset, extremist Hindus are dominating the community, and the peace-loving Hindus are the secular Hindus. What we see now that shining India is now burning India. Now there is no secular India; it is only the Hindu extremist India. From that perspective, the Modi government has fueled extremism in their community, and the anti-Pakistan sentiment, they always target the extremist Hindus to get vote, because BJP is actually the political wing of the RSS. And if we analyze, the RSS mindset is that India is for only Hindus.
Yes.
That is why we see that there are brutalities by the extremist Hindus as well as by the BJP government against Muslims, against Christians and against Sikhs also. Now see the cross-border terrorism emanating from India and going up to Canada and killing the Sikh activists there, and also in America and now in Britain also. And we see that 8 Indians has been given death sentence in Qatar because of espionage for Israel. All these irresponsible acts of India are to be taken care of and to be also taken.
Of course, that India is not only engaged in domestic terrorism activities and in the neighboring countries, but also the transnational, of course, terrorist activities as well. But coming to the recent false flag operations conducted by India, Mr. Humayun, how do you analyze Pakistan's response to these false flag operations? Of course, Pakistan has been, of course, responding to these in the past as well. What measures and strategies has Pakistan, of course, taken? Can you tell us and elaborate on those?
Expected from the Indian government side that they use this false flag operation just to convert the attention of its public and to gain this global sympathy in the name of war on terror. And as he just mentioned earlier, there were like 8 Indian ex-naval officers arrested in Qatar. Canada has been one of the most vocal voice now in terms of India's state-sponsored terrorism. England is also one of them. United States of America, although officially it didn't say anything, but its local domestic court has warned the Indian side. And then there are many other numerous countries which has joined the Canadian voice. And this is basically exactly what Pakistan has been saying for last many years, that India does not necessarily do the domestic terrorism in Kashmir or in many other states. They also do an international terrorism and state-sponsored terrorism outside as well. So now this basically justifies, from their point of view, the removing or moving of attention from their local failures in terms of what they do with the minorities, particularly with Kashmiri Muslims. And then they divert this attention towards this false flag operation. So in that regard, I guess Pakistan's stance has been very clear. We have been very vocal diplomatically, politically. Our intelligence agencies are very quick to respond. They've unearthed this malicious propaganda against Pakistan. And then again, if you remember, a couple of years ago, there was a huge an activity which was unearthed not only by Pakistan, it was EU Disinfo Lab. That is also something which they have been using against Pakistan in the European capitals, their think tanks, where they were making these false media houses, think tanks, and creating false news. And that's basically something which helps them in terms of justifying their propaganda against these false these operations, which they claim sometimes surgical strikes, sometimes terrorist operation allegedly by Pakistan, but somehow now the
Right.
entire world is seeing what their agenda
Of
is.
course, that is an important point that you, of course, highlighted, Mr. Humayun. But how do you, of course, analyze world's response to it? Do we have some mechanisms to make India responsible for these actions?
Unfortunately, if you talk from the realist point of view, United States of America has been supporting India in terms of hedging in India as a big brother in South Asia or in Asia Pacific in
Regional
terms of its
policeman,
strategy,
of course.
big brother. But at the same time, now we are continuously seeing that there are voices international capitals. Pakistan has also been in the forefront. We have provided 2 dossiers to United Nations Security Council as well in General Assembly, where we have provided substantial evidence in terms of India's involvement, not necessarily in Pakistan, but also in other areas as well in Afghanistan, using the Afghanistan soil against Pakistan. So now there are 2 points of view. Is there a concrete action against India? Yes, there are voices which is being raised. Pakistan is at the forefront. Canada is now at the forefront. United States, United Kingdom is also speaking. Its ministers are speaking. But at the same time, we also have to see India as a big economic power, and these big powers have their interest attached to India. So somehow, unfortunately, there's a deaf ear when we are officially to take some stance. But nonetheless, there are sane voices within India as well, which are continuously being raised against the rights of minorities, against what is happening in Kashmir, particularly with the reference of what you just mentioned about Article 370 and 35A. It's one of the largest open jail in the world. 17,000 youth have been arrested, multiple or thousands of people have been injured, pellet guns have been used. So there are like so many cases which are now continuously reported in international media, and that basically limits in somehow their power to blatantly violate international law, which they used to do earlier. But I'm not very hopeful that they will stop. They will continue. But so does the other countries and the international community. They have to keep raising their voice against this injustice.
Of course, the international community also needs to respond. And to talk more about it, we are joined in the studios by former Special Secretary on Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Naela Chohan. Welcome to the program. Of course, when we talk about these escalation in false flag operations by India, in your opinion, what are objectives that India is aiming to achieve, apart from diverting its own public's attention from the atrocities it is committing in Kashmir?
Basically, as you know, that the Modi regime is now preparing for its elections.
Of course.
And the basic agenda is Hindutva. So, to create hatred and to create confusion about Muslims in India and hatred towards Pakistan, because you see, in Pakistan when you have elections, nobody talks about what's going on in India. But when Indians have their elections, Pakistan is their bête noire. They are always talking about Pakistan, and that gives them the boost, because their whole political mechanism now under the Modi regime in particular is so Hindutva driven that they have to go through that hatred, and you can't create hatred if you don't have these false flag operations that have been going on. So, it is this agenda that get more votes and also divert attention, as you said, from what they are actually doing on the ground.
Right, that is very important. But when we view the latest report by United States Commission on International Religious Freedoms, and they have been reporting and pushing US Department of State since 2020 to include India in countries of concern. How serious are these allegations, and what are going to be its implications in your opinion?
I think these allegations are very serious, and these are fact based.
Of course.
What we see that because of the Indian atrocities in Kashmir, 50,000 Kashmiris, they have lost their life. About 100,000 houses or shops has been burned by the Indian law enforcement agencies, and presently about 40 young Kashmiris, they are missing, either believed to be killed or held in illegal detention by the Indian law enforcement agencies. And all these, I think, minorities, Muslim minorities, they are now feeling threatened, because it is not only elections, but it is now the overall atmosphere in Hindutva India or the extremist India. What we have seen, that the Muslims, they are being lynched for just sacrificing cow, and I think or butchering a cow, it is not a normal happening in India. The India previously was known as a secular India, where Hindus, Muslims, Christians and Sikhs, they were living peacefully, but now the situation is altogether different. Now
and
coming
it has
over
a
to
lot to do with, of course, Narendra Modi as leader of India as well, because we know that back in 2002, he was on, of course, no entry list of US as well. But now India enjoys good relations with United States as well. Do you think these reports by such organizations like United States Commission on International Religious Freedom are going to be impacting those relations, or the diplomatic impunity that Narendra Modi enjoys?
Here we need to realize and understand the strategic value of India for USA. But what we see that in the Indo-Pacific region policy, and also for containment China, India has become darling of the USA. And from that strategic perspective, I think it will not, this report will not have a very far reaching effects, but still for the community of the USA and for Europe, and especially for all the human rights lover activities, this is eye opener to know about the reality of the Modi government, how hegemonic or high tyrant the Modi government has been to the minorities. And I think with passage of time, the international community must take action, and they should stand with the human rights, and they should also take all these human rights violations seriously. And also that I would urge that the international community and the Security Council should take a note of the atrocities being committed against the Kashmiris, like the Palestinians in Gaza.
Right, but Ambassador Naela, can you elaborate on what country of concern stands when we talk about diplomatic ties, and how worried or concerned should Indian government be, because they are talking about, there are of course evidences of human rights violations against journalists, against activists in this report, and this is a recent report, and they have been of course pushing the US government and State Department since 3 years. So what's your take on in diplomatic circles, how serious are these concerns and discussions are taken seriously in these reports?
I think it has become very serious, because if you recall, when Justin Trudeau had made this statement during his visit in G20 in India, he had spoken of 5 eyes, and 5 eyes means that there were already 5 countries, agencies who had confirmed Indian involvement in these murders,
of
assassinations.
Course, dossiers were available.
Dossiers were available. He wasn't speaking of Canada, he was speaking of already 5 countries, which
transnational terrorism
yes,
activities, of course.
It included New Zealand, it included UK, it included USA. So when the 5 countries had already agreed, that's when no Prime Minister just takes this podium and makes such an allegation until he's very sure of what he's saying. So after that, India is now in a difficult situation as far as international community is concerned, and I think there are backdoor conversation going on, because the United States has also conveyed its concern to India, because even there such you know what happened there too. So now Indian government is there was one excess that they were doing for their internal domestic popularity, but at international level India's position as far as Quad is concerned, because who are the members of Quad? Japan, Australia, India, United States, these are 4 countries. So Australia is also part of 5 eyes, as is New Zealand. USA, of course. So how will they use India against China, because Quad was created to contain
Counter.
China.
And contain, of course.
How can they have such a partner who itself is doing nefarious activities in their home ground?
Let me take the same question to Humayun Sahab. Mr. Humayun, what's your take on this, that India's recent embarrassment in, of course, Qatar, Canada, US is going to be impacting India's global standing?
I think I'll agree with what Brigadier Saab was saying and Ambassador Naela was saying. Of course, there is an embarrassment on a political front, even diplomatically. Canada has downgraded its relationship, has expelled the diplomats, but India has reciprocated, and then they have done the same in embarrassment, I must say. But what Brigadier Saab was saying earlier, it's basically the global geopolitical divide which is happening throughout the world, and India has become the darling of the West, particularly of the United States of America. And in South Asian region, and particularly in Indian Ocean region, they have not been given a warning, stern warning. Yes, there are voices within the United States of America, within other international capitals as well, now diverting that attention in terms of creating these false flag operation in the name of gaining sympathy for fighting war against terrorism and saying that, there are terrorist activities being planned on their soil. So that's exactly the reason that they now want to divert that attention, which means there is a diplomatic pressure on them.
Right, of course. And Brigadier Saab, in your opinion, what role does Hindutva and, of course, anti-Pakistan, anti-Muslim, anti-minorities propaganda plays in India's, of course, policy making? And in your opinion, how does it impact India's ties with, of course, neighboring countries, including Pakistan?
What we have seen and witnessed in the past, that Modi has been successful to gain the political mileage by fueling and making anti-Pakistan policies, and also to make sure that it must have some hegemony in the region. And here we must be very practical to see that because of the support of the international community, especially from the USA and Europe, India has been able, and also they had very long outstanding relationship with the Russia, they have been able to subjugate some of their regional countries like Bhutan, Sri Lanka, to some extent Bangladesh and Nepal also. And I think only hurdle to Indian regional hegemony is Pakistan. So that is why one of their logical course of confrontation with Pakistan is that they want regional hegemony, and Pakistan is one of the most prominent stumbling block in that.
And what role does this extremist mindset of India plays in keeping India away from becoming a regional policeman, or maybe this superpower that they are aspiring to be?
I think instead of talking of policeman, I think India has failed to become a collaborative, peace-loving regional country. And because of the continuation of their Hindutva policies, because we must understand that BJP government has all the policies which the RSS wanted. So that Hindutva mindset is not new, and at the same time it has plagued the Indian community also and Indian society also, because we now see a division within the Indian society. One is and also among the political parties also, like Congress, they are saying that these extremist Hindu policies are going to destroy India globally also. And what we have seen, that in the international community also now there are voices being heard because of the cross-border terrorism or international terrorism being done by the India. And I think with passage of time these will gain momentum, and these will go against the strategic interest of the India. And here within their own community also, the division is not going to pay good for India, because we see there are many separatist movements within the Indian states also.
Of course, Humayun Sahab, Brigadier Saab is saying that this is against India's strategic policy, but do you think all this extremism mindset and of course these false flag operations aligns with India's own foreign policy?
I think if you see particularly this current government of Prime Minister Modi, it shows, and if you see the trend in the past, from 1998 to 2004, when they were in power, there were 8 major attacks in the Indian occupied Kashmir. Then when again they were in power from 2014 onwards, there are more than 30 to 32 different major attacks. That basically shows that, whenever they are in power, they use their influence and create these false flag operations. Brigadier mentioned about this Pulwama attack, which is an eye opener because the former governor of the state of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, he mentioned himself that there were BGP's top leadership which were behind that. They never provided the aeroplane. They were allowing that allegedly that truck which was happening all around. So he basically implicate his own leadership. Same goes if you take it back when Prime Minister Modi was Chief Minister of Gujarat, what had happened in Gujarat, and because of that he was barred from entering United States of America. He was banned, literally his passport was blocked. So this sort of the trend within his leadership and in terms of his foreign policy, it shows that this is a very systematic trend, that he uses these things, he uses this extremist ideology, mentality, so that he gains this idea of the Hindu majority region, or the Akhand Bharat, which they call themselves. So this is basically part of their foreign policy, and which is very unfortunate. We used to hear about this shining India. Now it has become a very darker India. And that is not only affecting India, that is affecting the region. There's not a single neighboring country within the subcontinent with which India has resolved the border dispute. They are fighting with them. There are issues with Bangladesh. There are issues with Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka.
Of course,
everybody
all the neighboring countries.
By them. So this shows their foreign policy.
So this shows us that there is, like you said, there is systematic approach to it, and it may align with their own foreign policy.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Humayun Khan, for joining us in this segment. And of course, when we talk about forthcoming elections in India, India's, of course, BJP government seems obsessed with Pakistan and anti-Pakistan propaganda to divert its attention from its own failures in, of course, domestically and in global standing as well. And of course, the world needs to take stock of India's actions for peace and prosperity within this region. We will take a short break here, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the recent situation in Gaza. Welcome back. Of course, now we will be discussing about the recent situation in Gaza. Of course, the death toll is rising by every moment, and of course 20,000 plus innocent civilians have been killed in Gaza, and more than, of course, 2.3 million population is displaced. And more than, of course, 90% people in Gaza and the neighboring territories are facing hunger when we talk about this recent situation in Gaza. But the world's response to all this situation is also a question mark. We will be talking about this. Brigadier Saab, when we talk about this situation, we see, of course, a double standard of the international community. Although we know that at a United Nations General Assembly session, most of the countries, more than 150 countries, of course, voted for cessation of hostilities in Gaza. But of course, US vetoed. After that, the situation is now that, of course, a humanitarian coordinator has been, of course, designated in the territory. How do you analyze all this situation?
Here we would like to, I would like to highlight that this is a planned genocide being taken by Israelis against the Palestinians, and the world is keeping a blind eye. And here it also announces the utter failure of the Security Council of United Nations as well as the United Nations itself also, because what we have seen that international community has failed to perform any proactive role to stop the Israeli atrocities against innocent civilian Palestinians, unarmed that too. and we have seen about 21,000 Palestinians has perished, their household has been destroyed, and the daily shelling taken by the Israelis is making life worse for the Palestinian, and world is not doing enough about it. What we see that the European Union as well as the American, they were the trumpeting about the human rights and about the safety and security of the human beings, but here they are keeping a blind eye, double standard as you highlighted, and these double standards are basically against the Muslims if we see. When it comes to the non-Muslims, we see that they take very spot actions and very fast response is fair. But when it comes to the Muslims either in Gaza or in Kashmir, we see the world is keeping mum. Nobody is worried that people are losing their lives, they are losing their livelihood, small children are being killed, hospitals are being destroyed, ambulances are being bombed. What else world need to have some evidence to stop Israelis?
The whole infrastructure in Gaza is of course
dismantled.
Of course.
There is no civic life in Gaza, no education, no health care, no electricity, no water. So Gaza has been also built into a graveyard, and that is the Muslims. And when we come to OIC and the United Nations.
Right, and let's of course talk to Ambassador Saiba about this. Can you provide us insights into the recent of course developments surrounding the United Nations Security Council resolution and of course abstention by United States and Russia? What's your take on all this situation at United Nations Security Council?
Well, I think that after hectic negotiations, at least the resolution was adopted because
right, but
they
Russia has
abstained.
said that it is toothless. What's your take on this? Because
it
the
depends on
secession
what
is not
teeth you
still-
want, because you know that is superpower rivalry. They have been condemning Russia for its venture in Ukraine. Russia reciprocates by condemning them in this Gaza thing, and support blind support to Israel. But as far as the international community is concerned, at least you can get the humanitarian aid to the suffering Palestinians. Not all of them are Muslims, by the way.
of course, Christians
There are
and
different
other
religions there,
of course.
but this is a breakthrough. Now the politics of it is that the Americans and the Israelis wanted, the United States, I won't say Americans, the United States and Israel wanted condemnation of Hamas, and the other side wanted condemnation of Israel. So in that debate, the resolution was being delayed while people on the ground were dying and suffering. At this moment, there is not even a single hospital that is functional. So people who are injured or dying have no place to go, and they have no food, they have no electricity. It's a dire situation. So at least now humanitarian assistance will be sent to them, and perhaps some lives will be saved, if not, you know, more. So in that sense, I think that this is a positive development, but a lot needs to be done. And as far as like Brigadier Saab was mentioning about OIC, OIC has been very active. The Secretary General of OIC was also involved in all these activities.
Right.
And you may recall that the foreign ministers of countries, because Saudi Arabia had held an emergency summit, if you recall, a few weeks ago, in which they decided that the foreign ministers of certain countries will go to P5 capitals.
Right. Of course, you are right about the role of Arab leadership. But when we talk about the specific resolution, in the absence of clear condemnation of the actions of Israel on innocent civilians, do you think accountability, or when we talk about ICC taking Israel to International Criminal Court, is going to be happening in coming days or in future?
Taking Israel to criminal court is a second step, which will follow once, because at this moment, Mariam, you must bear in mind, there are still hostages that are with Hamas and prisoners with Israel. And Israel
is killing its own prisoners in this indiscriminate, of course, violation against civilians.
its own soldiers also. You recall 3 soldiers
yes,
were
indeed.
killed by their IDF.
Of course.
So why would they do that? There is what they call Hannibal doctrine. Hannibal doctrine, there was a general called Hannibal who was Israeli, and he was caught in a situation where he decided to take his own life. After that, IDF made it a policy that if their soldiers are taken, they will kill them. So whatever pretext they gave that, oh, we didn't know they were civilians, although they had white flags, they were doing everything to ensure that the other side knows that they are Israeli soldiers, they were still murdered. So the Israeli strategy is very different. In this situation, I think the first step is humanitarian assistance.
That United Nations Secretary General has of course appointed a coordinator for all these trucks passing through the Rafah crossing as well. What's your take on this? Do you think this is going to be helping the affected population there when we see that indiscriminate aggression of Israel is against people residing in hospitals, in camps as well? So how this is going to be helping?
I think it will be helpful, because in this context we need to know that this is the first step to ensure that the food reaches to the people who are facing extreme hunger. And here it is not only enough, there will be follow-up actions. What I can imagine that the backdoor diplomatic maneuver is also taking place. Qatar is playing its role, and we have seen that exchange of hostages and prisoners previously had some confidence building measure, so that the human assistance can reach out to the Palestinians. And here the Israeli government will also have to realize that they have to give a rightful living to the Palestinian also, and it is their rightful right also.
But talking about rightful right, the first right of every human being is of course their own life, and they are being deprived of their lives as well. What's your take on the genocide that we are witnessing in this 21st century, and of course the world's response to it?
I think this is very sad episode of our human history up till now, because we are witnessing state terrorism by India as well as by the Israelis against the innocent Palestinians. But now silver lining is that the international community is now observing it, and they are showing some response. What we see that the protest against the Israeli aggression has been there in the Europe and in Canada also, and in US also. And I think with the building of momentum of these protests, they will be able to force their governments to have some proactive step to stop the Israeli atrocities against the Palestinians. And here also I think the humanitarian assistance which has been accepted, and a representative has been appointed by the Secretary General. Here also I would like to highlight that the Secretary General showed his annoyance and also his depression that he has not been allowed to play a very proactive role. And at least he felt satisfied that some representative is now being appointed who will ensure that the humanitarian assistance reach timely to the Palestinians.
But the aid going to, of course, these affected Palestinians is very low in amount. When we talk about the number of trucks, if previously 2,000 trucks would pass through the crossing in a week, now the number is only 20, sometimes it reaches to 100. So this is very low. And of course, different international organizations, human rights organizations are concerned that a number of people are going to be dying because of hunger and because of course, other diseases, because there is water scarcity as well. Food insecurity is an important issue for these affected people.
I totally agree with you, and that's why when the Secretary General had invoked Article 99, it was a special arrangement in which Secretary General could intervene and call for an emergency session of the General Assembly, in which this resolution was then discussed. It was tabled by Qatar and UAE. Now the debate became very intense because Israel has its own agenda. They are trying to look for a bigger Israel, and therefore
Greater Israel, and that of course we remember that Netanyahu showed in United Nations General Assembly session as well.
Yes,
He showed the map.
So you can see his audacity.
Of course.
So for that agenda, they are willing to take as many lives, their own and Palestinians. And now he is coming into elections. So January is his deadline. He has to achieve his self-defined agenda before he can go into elections.
And there are, of course, corruption allegations against Netanyahu as well. But of course, Ambassador Saba, can you provide us insights into the role of ICC, International Criminal Court, and how different countries, like the leadership played by Qatar and of course UAE as well, and other countries could join? Pakistan has been a vocal advocate for the rights of Palestinians. Do you think that they could take Israel accountable and of course make Israel accountable and take it to ICC?
Yes,
for the war crimes they are committing?
If you recall, it's about 2 months ago, before the 7 October thing, when it became bad, and then Hamas did the 7th October mission, after which, in which only 1,200 people had died. Israel, in a
they
reaction,
even changed the number. Initially it was 1,400 and then it reduced to 1,200 something.
Exactly. Israel killed 20,000 people, mostly women and children. So like the head of South Africa said, we will take Israel to international criminal court. Many African countries closed their embassies to Israeli embassies. Many other countries also in Europe and Asia took such actions. So that debate is continuing. At this moment, you see, the first step is to save the lives. After that, then the negotiation of hostages. Now Hamas has said that we are not going to return any hostages until there is a complete and sustainable ceasefire. Israel is not willing to do that. They are not bothered about the hostages. What they are bothered about is the election agenda. And now that agenda is also backfiring, because in Israel there are protests against Netanyahu's regime, and people are saying you're putting war on priority and not the lives of Israelis also, because Israelis are also dying. So now how far can Netanyahu pull it forward? How long can he get the US support when US is also going into elections, and President Biden's government is also under great criticism.
Of course.
They cannot have, and that's why when the first voting was done in UN Security Council, USA had exercised veto. Then Secretary General invoked Article 99, and this went to emergency session of the UNGA, in which this resolution was adopted with a large majority. Now then came the superpowers, how they were going to play it out, and they abstained, which facilitated the implementation part. Because remember last program you said UNGA resolutions are not mandatory, and I said yes, they are not mandatory, but this is a special situation where it is implementable. So now we are taking that step. They are not binding, but they are implementable. They are implementable. Right. There is a difference. So now that implementation is taking place, they could have had option also, and there was a debate on it, that put UN peace forces there to ensure the flow of humanitarian assistance that you were talking about. But Israel and USA didn't allow that. Israel didn't want the neutral forces to witness what atrocities they have committed on the ground.
Of course.
Consequently, they agreed to facilitating the flow of humanitarian assistance, but the tempo and how many trucks will be allowed per day are still being negotiated. So there are two negotiations that are still going on: the hostage issue and the magnitude of the flow that will be allowed.
Of course. Thank you very much, Ambassador Naela Chohan, for your valuable input. Thank you very much, Brigadier Hamid Malik, for joining us in today's program. Of course, the stories from Gaza, the resilience of its people, and of course, the ongoing situation, the unfolding situation at UNGA and United Nations Security Council as well. Of course, it all calls for renewed efforts for peace in Gaza, and of course to make Israel accountable for its actions. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.